Yeah, so I think just for like after our first episode that we created, we got a lot of feedback, which was great from a lot of people, but we also had a lot of like ideation meetings beforehand where Ruben, Martin, Josie, and myself really wanted to continue to build out this whole Money con Ganas podcast channel, whatever it may be, movement. And the whole purpose of it, in terms of like us talking, going back and forth, was that we wanted to find a way to get other community members involved who are also doing amazing work, who are also doing work that we find interesting, especially in the personal finance space, because that's something that isn't talked a lot enough about. And one of the persons that we did find was Michelle, who you can see on screen now. And that came about from actually Jocelyn doing research of like people he follows and accounts that he follows that he finds very interesting and content. So he shared that with us, and we all went through like your posts, your commentary, just everything you were sharing and are continuing to share. And we thought it was super invaluable. We thought it was great content, first and foremost, which was very informative. I think a lot of people will gain so much from it just from getting that information, and continuing with, oh, we want to continue to have this be more of a community kind of place where we discuss, have conversations. We wanted to reach out and invite you here. So we do appreciate you saying yes and taking the time to have this conversation with us. So I don't know if you want to just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself, about your personal finance page and everything you've been working on, and then we could just kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. I've been excited to have this conversation. One of the things that I value most in beginning my platform was community. I feel like we can achieve a lot individually, but as a community, I feel like these conversations are getting a further reach. As far as me, for those of your listeners, my name is Michelle, and I'm the person that runs Financial Gains. And it's a queer Latina operated platform that's really directed at the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus community and helping them navigate like everything that's finance. And it's a very complex topic. And for a long time, it's been out of reach, I think, to our community. So I'm just trying to make it more comprehensible for my people, really.
Awesome. No, yeah, that's a lot of the things that Jasim actually brought to our attention as he was sharing this information. And just going off of that, we just want to ask you, like, where did this start? Like, why did you want to create financial information for other folks? Like, what was the catalyst for that for you?
So the catalyst for me was just taking a look around at my family and the way that they were mismanaging their finances. And for me, in the last year, well, I had gone through a point in my life where I quit a job and I put myself into debt, and I really had no real sense of what I was doing to succeed as far as my wealth. And then I was looking around and I'm seeing my dad struggle and my mom struggle, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I am a reflection of their habits. So in the last year, I got myself out of debt, but I also had my dad approach me and ask me for help with his finances. And my dad's a 70-year-old man that still works, hasn't retired. And I thought, sadly, he's everything that I don't want to be. So how do I change that? How do I drive the change within my family? And how do I break this cycle? So I started having the conversations with, the next generation, my nieces, my nephews, my sisters. I got my sisters, investing, and my brother investing. And I just thought, like, this is something that we get to change the narrative. But really, it just came from the fact that my dad wasn't like really getting anywhere. So he came to me for help. And I thought, okay, there are a lot of people out there that need this help. And it's not only not accessible, but I think it's not in a language that's like, that's easily understood. So I thought I need to create content that is, easy to digest, really.
And Michelle, could you share a little bit more about these major realizations that you had? Because you speak of them so like beautifully and romantically in terms of like you had this notion and you were the reflection of their habits. And to me, as a trained counselor, right, and someone who has gone through like mental emotional health and am involved in Healing Justice Circle, that sounds like therapy healing language to me. So how did you come to those realizations of the mirror that you are for your family and wanting to be intentional about the money side specifically after transitioning from a job? Because that sounds absolutely incredible. And just from what you just said can be the entire podcast, if you will. But can you invite us a little bit more? Like, how do you get to that point of consciousness and self-reflection and generating those commitments?
I definitely think that how I speak of it now is not how I started, because it's not a beautiful journey. I think it's something it's really like you're peeling off the layers of everything that, all the traumas and all the money wounds that like our parents have faced, that my parents' parents and my parents grew up in poverty in El Salvador, and they really were just trying to survive. They had the survivor mentality. They came here to this country, and we didn't live a life of luxury. We lived a life of essentials. And, it was one of those things where I thought, I didn't realize that I was, low income till I was in high school, because I had my needs met, but I didn't know what I was like, quote unquote, missing. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to see how money was playing an effect, in my family. Everything from, my mom, like having this feeling that she had to loan everybody money. My dad always just living a paycheck to paycheck, cycle. And, I started to see it happening. And the only real money conversations that I ever had were with my older sister, who's 14 years older than me. And it was just about credit. She just told me, one day you're going to have credit. Your credit's going to be your identity. Take care of it. And as soon as I started to establish my credit, I took care of it because it was ingrained in my mind. But I thought, this is the only thing that, like, the only tool in my toolbox that I have when it comes to money, other than people telling me, save your money, save your money. And I grew up seeing like my mom hoarding cash under the mattress. Like I would ask her, like, can I go to the movies? And she'd be like, go to the closet and dig under the jeans and you'll find like, take a $20 bill. And it just was like the norm. You don't grow up thinking like, you just think everybody else must do it like this. And then you start to grow up and you're like, no, everyone doesn't do it like this or shouldn't do it this way. So I started to see how like the unity in my family was lacking. And I think it was lacking because there wasn't like we weren't being resourceful, but we also weren't we weren't using money as a tool. And I feel like, my parents' marriage fell apart and a lot happened. And I feel like had we been equipped to handle these situations better, maybe our whole family unit would look different. So I thought, I need to do something. I don't have children, but my siblings have children. And I thought, we can't continue this cycle. Like it has to stop. And it is, you don't realize like it is an awakening that you have. And it's like a conscious decision to say, hey, like this needs to stop. And, they say ignorance is bliss. And it very much is because, what you don't know, like doesn't affect you. So I started to talk about money. I started to have these conversations. And really, that's just how it all came to be, was me starting to normalize the conversations of money. And to the point where it got to my dad finally saying, hey, like, I need your help. And maybe because we developed that bond and that trust over these conversations about money, because I think in our community, like our parents don't want to talk to us about money, and men don't want to talk to us, like to women, about money. And there's these like systems in place that are so outdated and just not healthy. So I just, I'm an anthropology student as well. So I think that plays into it. Like my degree is in anthropology. So I started to look at my family as like people that I studied, you know? So it really opens your eyes to like, okay, these systems don't work, or how are they working for us? How are they working against us? And I mean, that's really how it just, the ball started rolling. And as it started to pick up speed, I thought, okay, how do I take this, you know, to a bigger level, to a bigger platform? And that's how my, you know, my platform came to be.
That's so beautiful. I know you mentioned that, you know, you had conversations and the conversation started, right? But how did those conversations get started, right? Just because the way I think about it, it's so like everybody needs to kind of like open up a little bit, right? At that moment, it's not like you know, it's not like, hey, let's just talk about money real quick, right? Like it's something that is so personal. It's something that it's, you know, not everybody feels comfortable talking about, right? Even if they might need help, right? Just because it's so personal. So can you, you know, maybe share with us, like, how did you go about having such conversations just with your immediate circle?
Yeah. You know, going off of that, money is definitely a taboo topic. I think people's identities, people tie their identity to their money. And it's something that people become very defensive about. And for many reasons, whether they feel like, you know, they don't have enough of it, or there's this, if they have what they would consider enough, there's this feeling that you need to guard it. Um, so I really just started talking to my mom, and I hate to say this because it's not an easy task, but it was more from a sense where I felt like I was the parent. I was the person saying, hey, you know, I've noticed that you are spending, or, you know, you only carry cash and you spend and you give, and you're not really keeping track of where this money's coming and going from. And, you know, same thing with my dad is the thing with my dad, after my parents and they separated, my dad moved on. So that's kind of going deeper into this whole story of mine. They separated. My dad met somebody on his trip to El Salvador. And, you know, you hear a lot of rumors about, oh, the men go out there and the women out there find these men and they take their money. And then it happened. So my dad found somebody who was just taking all his money. So I started to see it. I started to see the credit cards coming in. I started to see the statements coming in, and I started to say, hey, you know, I've noticed that you're racking up debt. What are you doing about it? Are you managing it? And he would say, I've got it under control. I know what I'm doing. So it's like I was being shooed away. And then it finally got to the point where I think he felt like in over his head and said, hey, I do need help. And he finally started to open up about it. And then as far as like the younger generations, it was simple topics like, you know, if you get a job, you know, and you get paid, like asking them questions like, where is your money going? You know, how do you feel about your money? You know, do you save your money? What do you spend your money on? Do these things bring you joy? Are they of value to you? Because I feel like the younger generations with social media and everything that they see, I mean, I feel like we're trained to be consumers, especially nowadays. So I didn't want them getting caught up and feeling like they needed to keep up with people, that they needed to keep up with, oh, so-and-so has these pair of shoes, so I need that as well. So with them, it was more of just make sure that your money is going to things that you value. Because I feel like when you have a better relationship with your money, then you're more likely to say, okay, how do I use this to further benefit me?
Your mic is off.
How about now?
Yeah.
So everything you've shared so far has been a lot to unpack. One is like, all right, well, just want to say congratulations on like being debt free. Like that's huge of it in itself, because in our society nowadays, like being normal is having debt. Like everyone thinks they should have debt or know someone who has debt. Like it's very much the thing. So you taking that step to get rid of it and then lead like the life that you do now post debt, I think it's a great accomplishment. And then also unpacking more of like with your family, talking about money. And we had this discussion before in terms of like, how do you talk about money? For me, I'm the youngest, so it was always like, well, how can you teach me about money? Or like, it's not always as easy to listen to the youngest tell someone else about money who's older and lived more. So how do you think that happened? Because you mentioned about your dad being like, I got it, I got it. Did you have to wait for him to come and be like, okay, I need help now? Or were you still like pushing a little and a little until eventually he's like, okay, let's see what we can do? Or like, how did that look like? Because as a parent, taking that advice from a child, it could be very difficult. So I think it'll be interesting to like know more of like what that approach was like.
Yeah, so that whole process, it was a lengthy process. This has been years in the making, really. And it finally got to the point where I just kept nudging. I kept nudging over and over. And he would say, no, I've got it. But the conversation really stemmed from the fact that he's 70 years old and he hasn't retired. And I thought, this is not healthy. Like, he's been at the same company for 45 years. And I thought, you need a life outside of work. You need a life outside of what you've been doing, because this is physical labor and it's starting to take a toll on you. So how do we get you to retirement? And then it was a realization, well, he hasn't retired because he's in debt, because he doesn't have any money. And I started having the conversation with my older sister, and I thought, I need to do something about this, because I don't want my dad to literally work himself to death because he has no choice. So I had the conversation with him and I told him, I want you to retire by this, by next year, by June of next year. And he'd said, well, I have some things that I need to take care of. So I asked him, and then, he opened up about it. He said, well, I have some debt that I want to pay. And at that point, it was just finding the easy solutions to get like his ball rolling. So I helped him snowball, because I thought at this point, the best thing is going to be for him to see progress. And it started to get the wheels in motion. And then he wasn't even honest about it all. He only told me about a few like store credit cards that he had. And then I told my sister, I need your help with having this conversation with him. You are the oldest and he may be a little more honest with you. And sure enough, as soon as she came in, he was like, well, there's more that I'm not saying. So it's been a process to help him. And I'm seeing that it's a very limiting belief, because I've asked him now, okay, well, now that we have this, somewhat managed, are you going to retire? And he says, well, what am I going to do with my time? So it's like you start to see like all these feelings that are like interwoven, and it's like a survivor. Like I think of it as a survivor mindset, where you just are trying to, make it day by day, and there's no thought process out of that. And I think, to be honest, as much as I know that I'm helping him, I don't know if he's ready to break out of that. I don't know if he's ready to retire and say, okay, I am worthy of a life outside of work. And that's what I'm working on now, is like, hey, you had a day off the other day. That felt really nice. You didn't have to worry about work. How did that feel? So it's really sad to see the way that my parents' lives played out because of the way that they handled their money. And I always think of like, who are the examples that I want to be like? And I have my role models, but I also have, sadly, the people in my family are the people that I don't want to be like. So it's an ongoing process.
Okay. As you were going through this, were you already doing your like personal finance page and disseminating information, or was this like the start and this was like the first person you like work with and we're trying to get this like, oh, how do I convey the knowledge that I have, or like, for example, that you had been gathering of like your own personal finances and kind of taking it and teaching it to someone else? Was this like the first instance of that?
No, I had other situations with my close friends who were a little more open about their struggles right off the bat and said, "Hey, I've noticed that you have a better understanding of this. What does this mean?" So I helped friends, I helped my partners, and my dad was that person that I just kept nudging, like, I'm gonna get to him. And this was all before like the platform wasn't even a thought in my mind, really. And once he opened up, that opened up my eyes, and I thought, okay, how many first gen children are out there having these same struggles that I'm having? Because I think a lot of us feel like we're our parents' retirement plan, and that we're, destined to take care of them because they weren't able to take care of their money. So it's something that I felt like there are a lot of people out there that can relate to this struggle that I'm having. So how do I share it? Because I know someone else needs to hear it. And as soon as I created the content, sure enough, the people started messaging me saying, this is what I'm going through, or this is what I feel, or just even simple questions like about their parents and their family members and the way that they were going about their finances. So I thought, okay, this is information that we need to put out there, that I need to be creating.
And Michelle, let me move us into a little bit of some knowledge sharing, right? So I'm still feeling very presently. I'm like in awe of you. I can think of how normal it is for many of our communities to go generations without two of the conversations amongst the 20 that you just offered in the first, like, what feels like 2 seconds of us getting started. So
Yeah,
I just want to name that a whole lot just got offered to us, to think about men being humbled by life, and getting to the point of being a 70-year-old man and having to admit to your youngest daughter that you need help, and to be at that point of accepting help. That in itself is a saga. And the rest of your family, and then you said like your friends and partners, and like it feels like you're that agent of culture change and all of the ecosystems that you are a part of. And that's absolutely incredible. I'm like mind blown by you, and that you are sharing it so like effortlessly and gracefully with like the most like colorful romantic language is incredible. So I'm still there, but I know that the time space continuum is holding us accountable here. So I want to move us to the next phase of the conversation, which is to think about the different community members that listen and watch to this space that we're launching. And some of us are in beginning stages, some of us are maybe a few years in, and some of us have been doing this for a while, and we're actively seeking spaces that will speak to where we are and to where we want to get to. So I want to move us in that direction. So why don't we start for the folks who are in like step 0, if you will, right? Like they're listening to this and they're like, I don't even know how to get started. How did Michelle get started? Sure, she's an anthropologist and her family and friends and partners are in such an advanced place. But what was day 0 for her? Like, did she read a book? Did she listen to a podcast? Like, how did she start learning about how to be more responsible, right? Like echarle ganas to the money part of her life. So what would you like to share with those folks? What are some of the insights that you want to share with them?
For the beginners, I would say that you definitely have to seek sources of information that feel relatable to you, that you can understand. Nowadays, we're seeing a lot more books. We're seeing more people of color that are disseminating the information. I would say start there. Start to find the voices that feel relatable to you. Now we have more people on social media that are freely speaking about money. I think that's a good way to, have the inner dialogue about money before you really start to make any money moves. And then I would say seek community, seek the people around you that are going to be willing to have these conversations with you about money. That's what I would suggest as far as like starting the journey. And then you have to really do the inner work, looking at what are your habits, what are the things that you feel are stopping you from really growing your wealth. What are the limiting beliefs that you may have? What are the money wounds and the traumas that you're carrying from past generations? And it's really a lot of inner work before it even gets into investing and saving money and paying off debt, because you have to really have a good understanding of how this affects your life as a whole. And then I would say start to look at your cash flow, and that's one of the things that I had posted about is before you even start saving or paying off your debt or investing, like really look at what are you bringing in, what's going out, so that you can see the numbers. Like, how are the numbers looking? Are you spending more than you make? What's that looking like? And then you want to have some cushion. I feel like you want to develop some sort of savings, because I've been in many situations, and I know a lot of people around me that don't have anything to fall back on. I had a dental surgery that I couldn't even cover, with my own money. I had to finance it. And I think there are a lot of things that come up within our community that you want to be prepared. So I would say once you have your savings and an idea of like what your cash flow is looking like, then you can start to really think of, okay, how do I pay off my debt? What's going to be the method that's going to be more beneficial for me? What's going to be easier for me? And then you want to start looking at the language of investing and understanding investing, because you don't want to jump into it without knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, those are really great points. And I think it's stuff that we hear a lot, right? In terms of, at least like my experience, it's like I'll hear that a lot in the personal finance space. My question to you would be, how or what do you tell those folks who are like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it like at the beginning of the year, even though they still have like 3 months, or like, oh, I'll do it next month. Or like people have perpetually put off looking at their finances out of like fear or like, I don't know, anxiety, whatever it may be. Like, what would you tell them to get started to even just, okay, I'm going to start this and just get in that mindset? Because I feel like that has been the hardest part of like getting people to look at their finances, is just starting. Like, how or what would you tell these individuals?
And I just want to say, for all the individuals that just got triggered, stay with us, fam. Francisco's not talking shit about y'all. We're all in a learning journey, because I feel like the tea just got served. I'm like, oh shit. I feel like I just got dragged. I could hear my friends and my cousins be like, what the fuck? But yes, please stay with us, because you're about to get the medicine that you haven't drank.
But I'm also not like immune to this. Like, that was me for a while, where I was like, I know I want to take care of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it took me a long time to finally just be very like honest with myself. So yeah, like what Ruben said is true. It's not meant to be like, oh, you guys need to, or y'all need to start now or do this. But it's like, how can we get them to start having these conversations and be very realistic of like, this is important, because you just shared with us like the story of someone who's like already at retirement age, but then there's people who are just starting off, graduating from college, graduating from high school, and they don't have no idea what their 20, 30-year plan is going to look like. And I think it's important to start early, but like, how do you get people to pay attention?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line, because you hear a lot of people say, well, the more time that you have, the better. But the reality is, what stops people too is that they feel like they don't have enough time. It's people feeling like, I'm 30 years old now, I didn't do it in my 20s. And then you have the people that feel like time is too much on their side, that say, well, I'll just deal with it later. And I have some people that I'm coaching that, we've had these real and raw conversations about, well, I don't know if I'm ready to do this now, or maybe this isn't the right time for me. And then you have the people that are like deep in their fields and saying, I wish that I would have done this 5 years ago. So really, I think it's a matter of really digging deep into what you value. Like, what is it that makes you happy? Because a lot of the people that don't do anything or are too afraid to start, it's because they don't know what that happiness looks like. They don't know what that freedom looks like. It's like we get passed down these like habits of, we get up, we go to work, we pay our bills, and that's what the cycle is. So there is more to life outside of that. And you have to look at the numbers. It's, there's debt repayment calculators that you can put all your information in that'll give you the stark reality of, hey, if you don't start doing this now, it's going to take you 15 years. It's going to take you 20 years to pay off this debt. So it's like you have to really value, your time and think about what's going to make you happy. And you want to think about the generations that are coming after you. You want to think about how are you going to change their lives? Even if you feel like it's too late for you and it's too late for your parents, what about your children? What about their children? How do we, level up? And I think you want to be open-minded. And I think that that's the thing, is like getting to that root of the fear and saying, hey, this is not going to outweigh my wants to be wealthy, to be comfortable, to be free, to be happy. So I would just say, like, take advantage of all of the resources that are out there right now, because I think now more than ever, we're seeing like so many people starting to have these conversations that are normalizing these conversations. So if there's a feeling that, you're alone in this journey, or that your situation is like too far gone, like that's not the right mindset to be in. Like, look for your community, look for your people that are going to hold you accountable, that are going to tell you, hey, this is how you succeed. This is how you can leverage your money.
So talking about specific asset classes, if you don't mind, this is not financial advice, of course, whatever we should test or discuss, but what would you have folks that are barely starting out look at as far as, let's say somebody gets to a point where they're paying off their debt, they've already made plans and they have a long-term or whatever medium short-term goal to pay off their debt. Maybe they've already paid off their debt. Let's say regardless, they get to a point where they want to start investing and accumulating wealth, right? Building towards something later in life. As far as asset classes, in my head, I sort of divide it, accessible asset classes, I sort of divide it into like in a sort of relatively illiquid asset class, like real estate. And then I look at like more liquid asset classes, like stocks or like bonds. Cryptocurrency obviously is another one. What would you have folks look at, as far as, or what do you recommend for folks that are just starting out? Obviously, some folks may have like some retirement plans, work sponsored, a 401k or something. What would you say to those folks kind of that are ready about, let's go ahead and start investing?
Well, I think for a lot of people, the easiest access to investing is through work, through their 401k. And I think in that situation, it's a matter of just participate up until your match. What your job offers you is not necessarily free money. It's part of your compensation plan. So you want to take advantage of it. Take what is rightfully yours.
Can you say that one more time? Can you say that one more time? Because I don't think that many people understand that that's, like you said, that is part of their package, part of their compensation, right? I think, people need to really understand that is the case. And that's why I'm asking you to say it one more time.
Justin in here like live DJing, rewinded the intro to the song real quick. Let me hear that shit one more time.
Yes, don't leave your money on the table. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's like, even if you feel that you don't have the means to invest, like at least take that much. Take what is yours. And don't let anyone make you think that it's not yours. Don't let anyone make you think that they're giving you that or they're doing you a favor. Because I think that's another very limiting belief, that people go into jobs thinking like, well, they're gifting me this, or it's for my hard work. No, like, you came into it with them already promising you this. So take what is yours. And then going back to the question, I would say one of the easiest things to invest in would be like index funds. Really, I think I know some people that start off and they're investing in, target date index funds, and that's a good vehicle in your 401k, to build some wealth, because it's doing the work for you. It's rebalancing on its own, and it allows you the time to start investing without really knowing the nitty gritty, parts of it all.
Real quick, because some folks might not even know what index funds are or ETFs, exchange traded funds are. You mind just really quickly recapping what that is?
So the way that I explain an index fund, it's like a basket of stocks and bonds, and it's a good way to have a diverse portfolio so that you're not having to go and like pick one individual stock. You're able to have multiple assets within your portfolio, and it's a good way to, I feel like that's what stops a lot of people, is the lack of information. So if you're starting off, so the target date index fund is pretty much a fund that's set up to get more conservative as you retire. So it has, the stocks, the bonds, and then people can just put their money in, and then they can start doing more research on what it is that they really want to put their money in, because there are a lot of asset classes, like you said. And I feel like as you get more advanced, like right now we're seeing the evolution of cryptocurrency, and we're seeing like NFTs, and we're starting to have these conversations about these things that are like so like far-fetched for a lot of people. And the reality is that, if anything, a lot of people think it's way out of reach, and it's more in reach than it ever has been, because these are not new. It's just new to the conversation. These have been around, but I would say for anyone starting off, as tempting as it is to invest in these, because I know you said that was your thing, like the NFTs.
Yeah.
So I personally wouldn't recommend to a beginner to go out there and invest in that. Even if people are saying this is the future of investing, I feel like it's a little too volatile, and I feel like it's a little too unknown when you're dealing with people that don't really have a real grasp on what investing is and what their risk tolerance is.
That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I first started, I was just, my work sponsored 457B. It's like a retirement plan, similar to 401k. That's how I got into the game of investing, probably most of us as well. And then, then I started researching individual stocks during the COVID crash, buying fire sale stocks. And then from there, I got into crypto. So yeah, it was definitely an evolution for me. However, let me play devil's advocate real quick. And without straying too much from the conversation, if y'all don't mind, I'm curious about what your thoughts are, as far as, we've kind of implied it already, but as far as diversification. I agree, for beginners, maybe it's a good idea for them or for folks that aren't really too privy in the world of investing, maybe start with diverse baskets of funds, like an ETF or an index fund or something, just to kind of get the ball rolling, and then you can do more research as you go along. Of course, this isn't financial advice, but I agree that's a good strategy. However, let me preface my question by saying that in crypto land, specifically crypto Twitter, we say that diversification is a fool's game when you're starting off with very little capital. And of course, very little capital is relative. Everybody has different conceptions of very little capital. For me, I'm just going to give an example and just say, let's say 4 figures to the low 5 figures, a couple G's, let's say you're starting off with, or a couple $100. In crypto, we say you should concentrate on a few small investments. Granted, because that asset class not promises, but can potentially make you more returns. You concentrate on a few small investments to build wealth, and then as you build your wealth, you diversify to protect that wealth. A lot of people in crypto make fun of like Warren Buffett, who's a famous investor, because all he says is, "Oh, let's diversify, let's diversify." But actually, he agrees with that. If you have a little bit of capital, you should actually concentrate on a few small investments and then diversify. So that's kind of what I've been doing personally. Of course, this is not financial advice, but I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on diversification, both for folks that are starting off, maybe with little capital, and folks that are later that have more experience and maybe have a little bit more skin in the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, more capital is going to put you at a greater advantage for what would be like real, diversification, because now you're talking like having access to more. Whereas if you're starting, that diversification is limited. But I think for me, I feel like language is a big thing. And we had talked about this earlier, is when I put my content out there, I think about how people are reading this. And a lot of the people that are reading my content are people that are new to like this entire world of investing. So when you start to get that technical, I feel like it can do a disservice to the community, because it starts to make people feel like, well, then I'm not doing enough. Then I'm not diversified enough in my investments. And I feel like it's really important to watch how we say things and what we say, because when I read the content that I create, I try to make it as accessible as possible, because I'm just the tip of the iceberg, like what I put out there. And it's like, I push for people to do their own research, because I can't tell you what to do. I mean, for many reasons, obviously, but I mean, the point is to just get people like dipping their toes in all of this. And I feel like when for you've been you're talking about really diversifying your portfolio. And I know in your last episode, I think you were talking about NFTs, and like, that's not always, as much as the language and the information is accessible, that's not accessible to everybody, and I think we want to encourage people to come into this forum and make them feel welcome, make them feel like they have a right to be here before we can get that technical, and I think, I'm all for it. I'm all for like, diversify. If you have the means to do so, why wouldn't you? I think that's the message here, is letting people know like that investing is safe to do. As much as there can be a risk, you want to make them feel like it's investing as a whole that you want them to understand. And I think they can decide further, down the road, what they're comfortable with, what they see, within their means, based on like the capital that they have.
Sorry, last thing. I should have also clarified when I said for folks that are starting off, I meant like diversification, not into different asset classes, but just like a basket of funds, like in an index traded fund, for example. But yeah, like definitely for anybody listening, do not just go ham and buying a shit ton of NFTs. Like because that's an extremely illiquid asset class. Like there's no guarantee that there could be enough demand for the supply that there is right now, and especially in an extremely saturated market. I meant more so as far as like a asset class that has more liquidity, where you can, because NFTs are like a house, even like real estate. You can't fractionalize your property when you need cash. You can't, for some extra liquidity, you cannot do that. But yeah, definitely, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think it's smarter to just, well, it depends, but to just concentrate on a few small investments, in one asset class, and then sort of learn about different things as well. But yeah.
And I like this. I like this conversation that we're having. Is making me curious about something that I would love, Michelle, for you to play with it. And before we go there, I just want to say this. I have a personal commitment that every time that I hear someone, especially a person of color, say, let me just play devil's advocate real quick, I always like to say the devil doesn't need a fucking advocate. So I want to make this space mindful of the language that we're using, because there's already enough violence and shit going on in our communities, and we don't need to be our own people that reproduce it, even in a language framework. So when we say the devil, let me play devil's advocate, we don't need to say that. We can always say, like, I'm curious about, or I would love your perspective on, or like, hey, on the other side of that, there's also this going on. But I just want us to be mindful of the language that we're using in this space, and just invite ourselves to be the medicine that we want to model for our communities. So with that intention, let's also be honest. There are mistakes that are happening in our communities. There are things that our communities are doing that are probably not and the best for their own health and well-being in this money side. So Michelle, would love to hear from you. What are some of those common mistakes that you know that community is making? I know that you coach. I know that folks reach out to you and your platform. I know that you have experiences in a personal context and in like a femtorship context. What are those mistakes that you would want to lift for folks and just say, hey, out there's these like 2 or 3 things that I frequently see that I would love our communities to do less of, so that we can also learn from that side of the house.
Yeah. And you're not, just to get clarification, you're not asking just about investing, you're talking about as a whole?
Yeah, just in terms of your money conversations at large. Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of what I see is people racking up their debt because they see their credit cards as an extension of their wallet. They see it as more money. And I think that there is a misconception that that is money. And that's not liquid money. That's not your money. And I think that people have this idea that because they got approved for a credit card, that now they have $5,000 in their pocket and now they have $10,000. So I'm seeing this cycle of people, applying for credit cards and racking up debt. And there's no real understanding of how to get out of this debt. So they're just swiping the card and not realizing how the numbers play out. They're not looking at the fact that they can negotiate, their interest rates, or that they can, or that they really shouldn't be maxing out, or how their credit score is affected. I think really what this all boils down to is like really doing the work to inform yourself, because not informing yourself is really doing the disservice to you. That's probably the one thing that I see the most. The second would be hearing all the conversations about investing and doing what other people are telling them to do, and not really understanding. And I talk to a lot of people that say, oh, well, I invested in this and I lost money, or so-and-so is investing in this, so I decided to do that, or my coworkers told me to do this. And I think that you really have to do your own research before you put your money into any sort of investment, because you have to understand what it is that you're doing. So those are probably the 2 things that I see happening the most in our community. And I think what that boils down to is that there are a lot of expectations within the community, as far as trust. Well, so-and-so is telling me this, so I have to trust that what they're saying is in my best interest. And you have to really think about it. And you have to have, I'm a big believer that you can't really take your money and hold on too tightly to it. I feel like money is like any other source of energy. You have to let it like come and go and flow, really. But you also have to have an idea of like, where is this money flowing to? What it is that you want it to do for you.
Yeah, I think going off of that, I think those are like really great examples of like what not to do, or like what not to follow blindly, in terms of like, oh, I'm just gonna do this or do that because of others. one thing that would be interesting to know is, what do you like define your relationship with money before you started doing all of your personal work, and how you saw money? And then how do you see money now? Because just like Ruben mentioned, you have this language that's very like fluid, even talking about how money comes and goes, but also like, what do you love and what brings you happiness? You mentioned that earlier. So it's like, what was your relationship to money? What did the word money even like bring out when you used to hear it before you kind of went through this journey that you're on now? And then now, like when you hear money, like what does that bring up?
I think at the beginning of my journey, when I heard the word money, I felt that money was not something that I was meant to have. I think because of how I grew up, I just always thought that it was going to be an endless chase. It was going to be something that I would never be able to multiply. And I think I had a lot of fear around money and this feeling that I could never have enough of it. And I think that was like shifting that mindset has helped me so much, because I think at the time, like, when I was still in debt, before I started investing my money, I would think of my money like a fling, like it kind of came and went, and I was okay with it coming and going. And then now I want to believe that I'm in a healthy relationship with my money, that I give it the space to do what it needs to do. I'm not fixated on how much I have of it. You see a lot of content creators that are calculating everything from like your savings ratio, and I feel like you kind of have to give money the space to breathe. And I don't like to micromanage my money. I feel like I make enough to, take care of my needs, but I also know that I'm privileged enough to make what will hopefully take care of me in the future.
That is amazing. Just because, for example, for me, I think, hearing that, what brings up for me, it's a lot of things that I have to unlearn, right? Just because, for example, for me, some of the conversations that I have with my girlfriend, right, at times is having to remind myself that I have enough, right? Because I am, I only have my student loans at this point. I don't have anything else anymore left, right, to repay. But I even have my budget, all those different things, right? I am saving, I am investing, I am putting money into like my retirement, all those different things. But because I've been looking at it from, like you said, I'm been micromanaging it, right, to make sure that I have what like my targets are and stuff like that. That has brought some level of anxiety at the same time, right? So I think just hearing what you just said right now is just like mind blowing to me, right? Just how do you separate yourself at the same time from, how do you separate from, what you said earlier, right? As to letting my money define who I am, right? And so, it's just, I just want to say that those are little things and piece of nuggets of information that are so beautiful, that are being shared, because it's not something that I think we think about on a daily basis, right? It's always like, oh my God, I don't have enough of this, or oh my God, I need this, or oh my God, how am I gonna do it so that I can pay this one thing, right? And I think,
Yeah.
one of the things that the way you share it, right, is how do we create that plan so that those different things that are coming up for us, are no longer creating that anxiety, are no longer creating those moments of frustrations, if anything. So, if you don't mind, right, I'm asking right now, it's as a money coach, right? What are some of the things that you help your clients, right? Just to give them an idea as to how you can help them out, in the future, right? For some of those listeners, right? If they decide that they would like to have a money coach, what are some of the things that you help them out so that they can eventually have that vision the way you have the right, as to feeling free, having a vision as to where they're headed, and not feeling like like they have some sort of something that they need to trigger at this point.
So I want to touch on you saying that, like, that anxiety that you were feeling about money. And I probably should have prefaced this, but I think one of the things that I do when I create my content and when I stepped into that platform is that I had to check my privilege. I really had to be aware of what my privileges are when I'm talking about money, because I'm well aware that a lot of people in the community don't have the same access to resources that I've had, or don't currently have the same, because the truth is, even having the internet access to reach me on my platform is a privilege.
Yes.
So I definitely think that's something we all need to take into consideration, is what are our privileges when we have these conversations. As far as what I do when I coach is I pretty much help people develop a plan, and I help them develop a plan by, paying off their debt. Because a lot of the people that come to me have debt. So what is more feasible, and really it's taking into consideration the psychology of money, and really getting a feel for that person, because a lot of people will say, like, pay off the high interest debt first, pay off the high interest first. But if you run the numbers and the amount that they're going to be, quote unquote, losing is not that great, but having them pay the smallest amount first and it's going to be consistent, then I'd rather them go with something that's going to be long-term. So I help people stick to their plan through accountability. I help people develop goals. I help people learn the basics of investing. And really, I work on people's mindset so that they're not acting and operating out of a place of fear and with a scarcity mindset, because that's one of the things that I also see, and I probably should have stated that, is that scarcity mindset in our community is real. People are operating from a place of not feeling like they have enough or can't have enough. So I help to really examine, like, what triggers people and how we can change that so that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Awesome. I think, all those points are really good for people to think about, especially I think when you have a money coach, a lot of it is just like a therapist, right? It's very like you have to mesh well with that person. You have to be able to be comfortable with that person. So I think you pointing out just some of the things that you might want to discuss with folks. But in terms of that, also acknowledging that maybe not everyone's going to have the same type of conversation. Some people might need someone different, but in terms of like, what should people look for in a coach? Like, what would you say are like two things that you feel are like important as someone is venturing into this and you don't want them to run into someone? I mean, on social media, a lot of these accounts are very, I don't know, like loan sharky. At least that's like the attitude where they're just trying to like get money or like sign up for this course or that course. And they're just trying to get money from you. But you, as someone who's trying to help and really trying to help people have a plan and progress through their journey, what would you say are like maybe two or three things that you think are important as you're vetting these like coaches and, are looking for someone to help you have these conversations?
Yeah. Going off of that, I definitely do see some of these accounts that are a little aggressive in their approach. And I think that for me, at least, it was really difficult to not only create this platform and then to promote my services, because I started to feel like, well, people are going to think that I'm only helping them because I'm interested in making more money. But the reality is my time is worthy. And if I don't put a cost to my time and show people that my time is worthy, I have to be a model for these people. So that's, that's something that I take into consideration. But I think when you're looking for a coach, you have to find someone that feels relatable, someone that you think will have the same life experiences or similar life experiences to you. Because I think, as for me at least, it's like, as a queer Latina, as a first generation daughter, like my experiences are pretty specific. There's certain range of people that will relate to me and my story. So I think find someone that you can relate to, so that when you have these discussions about money, they can understand and say, yeah, I went through that too. And then really, I think at this point, I think for the most part, the money coaches, at least in my network, we all try to be accessible as far as cost. But I think just be realistic and know that it's an investment that you're making. Don't go out there looking for the cheapest coach, because that doesn't, that's not necessarily the smartest thing. But don't go out there looking for the most expensive coach thinking that, price and quality are linked. So I would just say, look for what feels comfortable to you. If you relate to the content that they're putting out, if you relate to the stories that they're putting out, and the voice, you feel like they're a voice of reason, then a lot of us have clarity calls that we provide for free, where you can have a conversation with us and see like if we are a match. And I always say, like, if you choose to work with me, because it really is a choice. Like, I don't want anyone to feel obligated to choose me just because I gave them my time. So really do your research, find someone that you feel that you want to spend time with.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful for people. So hopefully those that are listening and thinking about talking to someone about their personal finances start to just see that as an investment, as part of like this longer term like plan, that it's not like, oh, I'm losing out on like a coaching session, but it's more of like this one coaching session literally launched my whole 30-year plan that now is going to align me, my family, for like a better future. So I think it's important for people to start thinking about it in that mindset. We're up on our hour of conversation, which is, I mean, incredible to think of that it went by that fast.
Yeah.
Conversation has been really well, but I want to be very respectful of your time, because you were gracious enough to join us, have this conversation with us. I don't know if any of the team here has any last questions for you, or if you have any questions for us, or any other comments you would like to say before we kind of start wrapping up here.
I actually do. I want to thank you all for your time as well, and for inviting me to have this conversation. I'm big on normalizing these conversations and seeing people of color and people that, I want someone to see this and say they look like me and they're having these conversations. If they can do it, I can do it. And one of the things that I have been receiving are messages about not seeing the men of color having these conversations. People asking me, do you have any, recommendations as to who I can follow that will be relatable to me? So I think seeing you all create this space and to, create a safe space to learn and unlearn, and to be able to hold each other accountable and check each other, I think that's so important, not just in the realm of money, but just in general. And I think that what you're doing is very admirable. And I'm really thankful that you guys had me.
Likewise, I mean, it's great. It's great to be able to connect with different folks in the space and talk about something like a very touchy subject, that we definitely don't talk enough about. Before we fully make the rounds, I would like to ask you one more question, if that's cool. Being the crypto guy, I have to ask you another question regarding that, if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
So yes, crypto, maybe for a beginner, for somebody that's just starting, might be a little too technical. It's definitely not the traditional route, but that's also, the world is changing. You know, in the future, perhaps we might not even have such a thing as banks or traditional finance. Seems like the world is becoming more decentralized, more peer-to-peer, without being too technical. But I also want to say that it is like a kind of a cultural phenomenon that's happening right now, for example, with different NFTs, right? Without even getting into the tech behind what makes an NFT an NFT. Most people just see it as art, right? We have artists releasing, you know, 1,000, you know, pieces of arts or parts of their album, right? So it's onboarding a lot of users in this space. And so a lot of people, more often than not, at least with me, have questions about crypto rather than index funds or different things. So it's important that we address this emerging asset class as well as other traditional, maybe you could say more conservative, but also good ways to invest. So I want to just ask you, of course, this is not financial advice, but do you have a recommendation for folks that are just anybody, regardless of what level you are in your investing journey or how much capital you have or don't have? Do you have like a percentage allocation recommendation for folks? Because I've seen anywhere from like financial analysts say or financial advisors say, oh, you know, if you're just starting, maybe have like a 1 to 10% exposure to Bitcoin, and that's just Bitcoin, that specific asset, because that'll be like your risky, you know, your risky what's it called, allocation, you know. But do you have any recommendations, or are you invested as well? Like, if you don't mind my asking.
So I could feel that you were itching to ask me about this. I'm like, he's not gonna let me leave without asking me. But as far as cryptocurrency, what I will say is that money is always evolving. And when you think of money as a technology, like money wasn't always like it wasn't represented as a coin, as a bill. Like when you take it back into like the past and ancient civilizations, money was, you traded certain things, certain commodities as money. So money has always been evolving. So this emergence and this like more recent conversations about cryptocurrency and NFTs, like I'm not surprised by it, because like money needs to continue to evolve and it has to suit our needs. And I think the idea of something that's decentralized is very appealing for it to be peer-to-peer, because you know we're now looking at like pretty much breaking up a system that has been our norm for so long. As far as recommendations, I don't like making recommendations, but I will say I think if we want to be safe here, I would say anywhere from like 3 to like 12%. I think like that's as far as I would go as far as like recommendation. And yeah, I don't think anyone should be afraid of where this is going. I think a lot of people are using cryptocurrency from an elitist perspective of like, it's something that's untouchable, it's something that's out of your reach, or, you know, it's for people that have more capital. And it's really not, because if you look at who's investing in it, you're starting to see, if we're talking about diversification, we're seeing like a diverse, you know, group of people that are starting to invest in this. So I definitely wouldn't tell anyone not to invest in it, because I know that a lot of the personal finance creators are like, no, like, you know, no on the crypto, no on Bitcoin. But I can't say that I feel the same way. And that's maybe because of my background and what I've studied, that this is just, you know, like time, like we're seeing like it play out, like how is this changing? And we have to roll with the changes, because like it's when we stay fixated in our ways that like things evolve around us, and we don't end up taking advantage of the resources that are there. And I think this is a very, I mean, yes, it's risky, but I think this is a resource that people want to jump in now, because you don't want to look back and say, well, I didn't evolve with the money.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, if you look at the total number of the global users of just Bitcoin, it's only 3.7% of the total global population. So talk about the global adoption curve. We're extremely early. But of course, volatility is the premium you pay for being early. And so we're getting near to, crypto runs on 4 years without getting too detailed, but we're getting near the top. So also, folks, just be advised with buying. I totally agree with everything you said, and it's a really exciting asset class, and the evolution of money, how it evolves, how especially how it might potentially provide a more egalitarian, more accessible way of dealing with money for folks. Also, it can be skewed because capitalism, but yeah, it's great, awesome. Thank you for that, for answering that.
Yeah, because I mean, that's one of the things, talking about my dad retiring. My dad's dream has always been to retire in El Salvador, and it's like they just adopted Bitcoin. So now he's saying, well, I don't know if I want to go out there because things are going to be more expensive. So I think there's definitely like more education that we need to have on this asset, because people are starting to think of it with fear, and we don't want that. That's what we're trying to break away from, is like thinking of this as something we need to be afraid of. Like, it's everything is a tool, like it's all a technology. So how do we use it to our benefit?
No, thank you for the insight. I think it's always good to be able to listen to different viewpoints. And just like you said, money is ever changing and ever evolving. So that only means our relationship with money will always be ever evolving. And it's a very fluid thing where how you interact with money, how you look at money now is going to change in the next year, 5, 10, 20, whatever it may be. So I think the work you're doing is amazing. So I think it's helping people really not come to terms, but more of like accept that I need to look at money and pay attention to it. And I don't like the saying where it's like, oh, you only care about money, or you only talk about money, because inadvertently we talk about money all the time because our whole society revolves around money. Like if you want housing, transportation, food, etc., it all takes money. So I think it's more people understanding your relationship with money and being able to use it to build this life that you want. And even though you may not reach it 100%, at least you're building something that is going to be better than if you don't pay attention to it. If you just rack up debt, or if you put things off and don't invest, or don't try to save for retirement, etc. So I think having those conversations are difficult, but having more people and more folks like yourself doing this work is just going to not only help us, but help the community as a whole really kind of progress together. And I think it's all about being able to uplift ourselves and really take charge in things that we didn't know about in the past. But now that we do, we need to make sure that we advocate, that we teach, and have the younger generations not follow in the same footsteps if we can help it.
Yeah, and I think this is all just the tip of the iceberg. So I think the work that we're all doing is really a part of the movement and part of the process. So I'm excited to see where this is going and where this is going to evolve. And I think between all of us continuing to do this work, you can only imagine we're already making a difference in people's lives now in this moment. What's that difference going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? So, yeah, it's something to be excited about.
Ruben, Josim, I don't know if you have any closing questions for Michelle or anything else you would like to share with everyone else that's listening in.
I don't have any questions. All I have is I do want to say thank you. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the beautiful insights. Not only in your professional settings, right, but also in your personal life, right? Because you did share some of your personal stories. So thank you for opening up and letting us share that those stories, if anything, with the audience. I think personally, like I said before, even before we started recording, right? The reason I reached out to you is because of how relatable you are, right? You were able, in sharing some of the posts that, I was dealing with some of the stuff, trying to help my mom, setting up some of the stuff. And it was just beautiful to see that, there was somebody out there that was also sharing that information that I was seeking, right? So I think, like you said, putting the language that you're using, right, making it accessible to everybody else, that is something that we need to thank you, because not everybody is doing that, right? There's, like you said, there's barriers when it comes to the accessibility, right, as to understanding, because we're at times too technical, because we cannot make it simple enough at times, right? So thank you for making some of the terms, right, that are used in finance at times, or so accessible, that for that I do want to thank you.
Thank you. That's a big compliment, because like I told you before we started recording, I really put so much thought into how I word things, because I want it to be accessible. And that's my challenge to you all too, is that you really take into account like what vocabulary you're using, and like what language you're using to talk about money and to share these important messages.
Great. I think I don't know if Ruben is still on there, or if you could pull him into you. I don't know if you had
Ruben, would you like to share something?
Oh, because they're together.
Yeah, they're in the same room. So I think Ruben's account was logging off, but I don't know if you have any closing words.
I mean, like technical difficulties over here, it makes no sense when we're like next to each other. I think Justine was taking all the bandwidth in the house, which is a good thing because we're recording this whole thing on his computer. But yeah, Michelle, something that I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if we got to play with this, but I'm always very mindful that sometimes it feels like when we get into these kinds of spaces, which are incredibly sacred spaces, because there's not that many. I mean, there's a reason why we decided to come together and launch this community space, because we weren't seeing that many spaces that were holding cis, hetero, Latinx, BIPOC men accountable to also learn and to humble ourselves and to share our family journeys and to want to learn with others. So thank you for being our first guest and trusting us to be in this space with all of the intersectional identities that you hold and all of the experiences that you have with yourself, with your family, with your friends, with your partners, with your communities. And I was hoping, whatever capacity you have, but what comes to mind for you that helped you in the moments where you were having the most challenging of times? And what's something that nourished you and kept you going when you were thriving and you wanted to make sure not to like be irresponsible when you're in that thrive mode? Because I think those tend to be pendulum swings, right? And in terms of this like money conversation, like money con ganas or whatever, like I remember my somatic experience and how differently I feel the first of the month when that paycheck hits versus like the last week of the month or the last day of the month when all of that shit is gone. Right. And like, even when I feel like I was responsible with all my money, I'm like, fuck, I still feel broke as fuck, even though like I'm being responsible with my money. And at the end of the month, I'm barely making it through. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of moments. So in that thrive days and in the most challenging of days, obviously our lives have changed a lot now that we're professionals at the stage that we're in. But that's as an example, right? How differently you feel when you have all your money versus when you have none of your money. So what have you learned about those moments, and what would you like to close out here as words of wisdom for folks?
For me personally, what kept me going was the thought of, honestly, and it's a very personal thing, very sacred, what my thoughts were in my most difficult moments were the thoughts of my grandmother. And I never met her, but I thought about all the experiences that she had and the life of poverty that she experienced, and me thinking, I get to change that narrative. I get to be, the change in that lineage. I'm living her dreams. And I think that in itself was what kept me going, was that I felt I could feel and I could see the change that I was producing, and that my story no longer looks like my mom's story. It looks nothing like my grandmother's story. And I think that's what I would say to people. Like, even if you're frustrated, even if you're still in that paycheck to paycheck cycle, because it's difficult to break out of, is think about how different your life is in comparison to the generations that came, you know, before you, and think about how different it'll be after you.
Yeah, I think that's a very great way to wrap this whole amazing conversation that we've been having. I think is a great way to put perspective in folks' minds and allow them to use that moving forward. So, I mean, with that, I just, again, thank you so much for your time. I know I speak for all of us here when we say we're very grateful to have you here, and having you as our first host, be able to share this conversation is just amazing as well. And we'll see what the future brings, like you said, and hopefully there's more collaborations in the future with a lot more other parties involved. That way we can continue to grow this and just shape the community in a positive light.
Let's do dinner when we're on LA. Let's take out Michelle.
Yes.
Food on us. I pay for the drinks because my shit crashed, and Martin pays for the meal because he was late. So that's how we do the thing.
You're right.
Accountability.
And let's go to a place that we can play with that we can pay with all those cryptos. I need to see this shit in person.
That would actually be great. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Yeah.
That'd be a dope IG story, like taking Michelle out to dinner and paying with crypto, like all that kind of stuff. It'll be dope. And Michelle gets to pick wherever she wants to go.
That sounds like a plan. I'm for it. And also, I would like to extend the invite to you all. I'm also going to be starting a live series, so I would love to have people like you so that my followers see themselves in you. So I will be reaching out. So this isn't the end. I feel like if anything, like we just started a friendship. You are a part of my community. So
no, we love it.
Thank
I
you.
think that's an awesome way to look at it.
Love that. I'm super hyped. Put a date on it and let's make it happen.
Yeah.
sounds good.
Great talking
Thank
with
you
everyone.
all. Thank
much.
you.
Bye. Besitos. Take care, y'all.
Bye.
Keep inspiring.